Right in the middle of the corporate gala, I stepped away to use the restroom. When I returned, I caught my direct manager secretly slipping an unknown powder into my wine glass. I didn't say a word. I just quietly swapped our glasses. 10 minutes later, I stood up, respectfully raised my glass to her, and coldly watched as she tilted her head back and downed the spiked drink. What happened next shocked the entire ballroom, while I was laughing like a maniac on the inside. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that took place right in the heart of New York City, a place where glass skyscrapers reflect the endless stream of yellow cabs and traffic, a place where warm streetlights can hide a lot of secrets, but can never hide human nature. My name is Vivian. That night was the company's victory gala for securing the new Hudson Yards commercial development project. The total contract value was $80 million. That number was enough to keep the entire acquisitions department burning the midnight oil for 3 months, and the person who directly closed that deal was me. We were at a 5-star hotel right in Midtown Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers rained light down on the banquet tables, making it as bright as day. Red wine swirled in glasses, and the sound of toasts echoed endlessly. "Vivian, you really pulled off a massive win this time, Henry," our managing director said, patting my shoulder. "Mentally prepare yourself, you're stepping up to project director next month." I smiled, raising my glass in return. I looked calm on the outside, but inside, a storm was brewing. 3 years ago, I walked into this firm with nothing but a bachelor's degree and a beat-up suitcase. 3 years later, I was about to touch a position that many people only dreamed of. But amidst the glittering lights, there was a gaze as cold as a needle constantly tracking me. Lauren. She was my direct supervisor, someone who had helped me quite a bit in ways I would never forget. Lauren wore a burgundy evening gown, her hair in an elegant updo, her lips painted a bold crimson. She was laughing and chatting with Preston, our executive vice president, but her eyes kept darting in my direction. 3 years ago, we joined the company in the same cohort. I threw myself into the work, while she rapidly climbed into a management role. I wasn't naive. I understood that in this Wall Street-adjacent environment, being good at your job wasn't enough. 3 months ago, my boyfriend, Michael, suddenly broke up with me. 2 weeks later, he publicly attended an internal company mixer with Lauren. I didn't make a scene. I just stayed silent. But silence doesn't mean forgetting. That night, as the jazz band's music swelled louder, I excused myself to the restroom. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step sharp and clear. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my perfectly made-up face. "Stay calm, Vivian," I told myself. After washing my hands, I stepped back out into the hallway, and in that exact moment, everything shifted. Through a decorative mirror angled near the corner of the wall, I saw Lauren standing by our table. She glanced around before quickly pulling a small packet from her designer clutch, a white powder. She dumped it straight into my wine glass. I stood dead in my tracks. My heart pounded, my ears rang. Lauren used a tiny cocktail stirrer to mix it. The powder dissolved instantly into the Cabernet. She placed the glass exactly where it had been and sat down like nothing had happened. I shrank back into the shadows, my mind racing with a single question. What is she trying to do? If I drink that, what will happen to me in the middle of a crowded ballroom? I could have rushed out and screamed, but I had no proof. The security cameras probably couldn't catch that angle clearly. And more importantly, I didn't want to tip my hand just yet. I took 3 deep breaths and stepped out, keeping my usual polite smile plastered on my face. I detoured past a waiter's tray and grabbed a fresh glass of red wine. As I reached the table, I accidentally bumped into Lauren's arm. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Lauren," I said, quickly grabbing a napkin and leaning over to help her wipe her dress. In that split second, I swapped the positions of our 2 glasses. Fast, clean, unnoticed. Lauren looked at me, momentarily startled, but when she saw me holding the other glass, which was actually the one she had just sipped from, she let out a subtle sigh of relief. She thought I had taken the bait. 10 minutes later, I stood up and raised my glass. I want to propose a special toast to Lauren for guiding me through all this time. The whole table applauded. Lauren couldn't refuse. In front of all the executives, she raised her glass, the spiked one. I looked dead into her eyes. To your health, I said. To your promotion? Lauren smiled. She tilted her head back and drank it all. I only took a tiny sip. 3 minutes. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. At first, Lauren was still smiling and chatting, but then her voice grew abnormally loud. Her gestures became sloppy and exaggerated. Her eyes glazed over. Preston, I'm so hot! Lauren slurred, tugging at her collar. The atmosphere at the table froze. She stood up abruptly, spouting absolute nonsense, her face flushed red, hands trembling. Then, she suddenly lunged at Preston, grabbing his jacket in front of everyone. Don't stop that, Preston said, peeling her hands off, his face turning pale. The entire ballroom erupted into murmurs. Henry stood up and shouted for someone to call 911. Lauren collapsed to the floor, her body lightly convulsing, babbling incoherent sentences. I sat perfectly still, the wine glass in my hand ice cold. A female coworker whispered next to me, Vivian, what's wrong with Lauren? I shook my head slightly. I have no idea. Maybe there was something wrong with the wine. My words were just enough to plant a seed of doubt. The paramedics arrived, and Lauren was wheeled out on a stretcher under the shocked gazes of the entire firm. The gala dissolved into chaos. When I stepped out of the hotel, the chilly New York night wind hit my face, waking me up. My phone buzzed. An anonymous text message from an unknown number. Swapped the glasses pretty fast. I froze. Who saw it? Before I could reply, the message disappeared. That night, I returned to my apartment in Brooklyn, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window looking down at the stream of headlights. I didn't feel triumphant. I only felt a strange sensation, a mix of relief and deep unease. The next morning, the company launched an internal HR investigation. The toxicology report showed a strong, illegal synthetic stimulant in Lauren's bloodstream. I was called in for an interview, and exactly as I predicted, I was a person of interest. But what sent a chill down my spine was another piece of information. The security camera footage for the banquet area was missing exactly 20 minutes of recording the exact time frame from when I went to the restroom to when Lauren had her breakdown. It wasn't a glitch. Someone had deleted it. The question was, whose side was that person on? Mine or Lauren's? That afternoon, as I stepped out into the 27th floor hallway, a man was already standing at the end of the corridor. He wore a sharp charcoal suit, his eyes piercing and cold. Hello, Vivian, he said. I'm Thomas, the new CEO. Before I could react, he continued. I was in the VIP lounge on the mezzanine last night. I saw everything. I could hear my own heartbeat. What do you want? I asked bluntly. Thomas looked at me for a long time. I wanted to see how smart you really are. That sentence opened a door I never expected. I began to realize that the night at the gala was just the opening move in a much larger game of chess. The new CEO. I looked at the man standing before me. Thomas wasn't overly imposing in height, but he carried an aura that made it hard to look away. His gaze wasn't aggressive, but sharp enough to strip away whatever camouflage people tried to put up. I saw you swap the glasses, he said directly. No beating around the bush. The 27th floor hallway was dead silent. Most of the staff had already left. Through the massive glass panes behind him, the Manhattan skyline flickered like a carpet of diamonds. I didn't deny it, but I didn't admit it either. What do you want me to say? I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. Thomas gave a faint smirk. I wanted to see how you'd handle it when someone holds leverage over you. Leverage? I chuckled softly. If you had proof, you wouldn't be standing here talking to me in private. He stared at me. Not angry, not condescending, just calculating. I don't intend to report you, Thomas said. And I don't intend to protect Lauren either. Hearing Lauren's name made my chest tighten, not out of fear, but because I knew this wasn't over. So what are you going to do? I asked. Thomas leaned back against the glass railing. I want to know why you didn't just scream the moment you saw it. I stayed silent for a few seconds. The AC hummed, carrying the scent of fresh carpet and floor cleaner. Because no one would believe me, I replied. Because I had no proof, and because I knew if I drank that glass, the person writhing on the floor last night would have been me. For the first time, Thomas's eyes shifted no longer a cold, surveying gaze, but something akin to acknowledgement. Lauren isn't smart enough to wipe server footage herself, he continued. Those missing 20 minutes means someone helped her. I clenched my fists. Who do you think it is? Who do you think it is? Thomas countered. In my head, a name flashed. Preston, the executive VP. The man who always backed Lauren on every decision. The man the whole office secretly knew was having an affair with her, but I didn't say it out loud. Whoever it is, this isn't over, I said. Thomas nodded. Exactly. And starting tomorrow, you're going to have a target on your back. Am I scaring you? He looked straight at me. I'm warning you. I left the corporate building well after dark. Sitting in the back of an Uber, I looked back at the glass skyscraper. 3 years of my youth. Countless nights of overtime. Putting up with endless corporate politics. I wasn't going to let myself lose just because of a dirty trap. The next morning, the air in the office was thick. Internal Slack channels were buzzing with rumors. Some said Lauren was a closet junkie. Others claimed she was framed. And of course, Vivian was a name being thrown into the mix. I walked into the bullpen, my back straight, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. Lauren wasn't back yet, but Preston was. He stood by the espresso machine, watching me unblinkingly. As I walked past, he spoke up. Vivian, in my office. Just a minute. The tone was casual. But today, it sounded entirely different. I walked into Preston's office. The door clicked shut. The room smelled of dark roast coffee and the faint hum of the HVAC. Do you know how serious last night was? Preston started. I do, I replied, not using his title for the first time. Preston frowned. I get that you're stressed, but remember Lauren is your superior, he said. She's the person who put something in my drink. I stared him down. Preston faltered for a microsecond, but I caught it. Do you have proof? He asked. I have suspicions, I said. And I have reasons for those suspicions. Preston fell silent, then gave a dry laugh. Vivian, in this firm, sometimes being smart isn't enough. You need to know where you stand. I stand on my merits, I replied. And what does Lauren stand on? He asked, dropping his voice. It wasn't a challenge. It was a probe. I don't care, I said slowly. I only care about whoever is trying to ruin me. Preston leaned back in his leather chair. You should stop here. Don't dig any deeper. For your own good, it wasn't advice. It was a threat. I left his office feeling a slow burn in my chest. If I stayed quiet, they'd think I was scared. If I escalated it, I'd be labeled a liability. That afternoon, Thomas summoned the entire acquisitions department. Lauren wasn't there, but her front row seat remained empty. Thomas walked in, his gaze sweeping the room. Regarding last night, he spoke in a low, clear voice. The company is cooperating with the authorities. The toxicology report confirmed illegal substances in Lauren's system. The question is how it got there. Nobody breathed a word. Let me reiterate, Thomas continued. Anyone who breaks the law, no matter who they are, will be dealt with to the absolute fullest extent. His eyes lingered on Preston for a fraction of a second fast, but enough for me to catch it. After the meeting, I received a text from the unknown number. Think you've won? This time, I didn't delete it. I dialed the number. To my surprise, it picked up. Lauren's raspy, cold voice came through. You're a psycho, Vivian, she spat, swapping glasses right to my face. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. Drop the act, Lauren laughed bitterly. But remember, I'm not down for the count. You're in a hospital bed, I said. I'm being discharged. Her voice turned razor sharp. The call disconnected. I stood in the middle of the office, feeling like a pawn on a chessboard where all the pieces were moving at once. That evening, just as I got back to my apartment, the doorbell rang. I opened it and froze. Lauren stood there. She looked pale, but the malice in her eyes hadn't dimmed. We need to talk, Lauren said. I looked right at her. Come in. The small apartment was bathed in warm light, casting shadows on the two women sitting across from each other. No longer co-workers, no longer boss and subordinate, just two people who knew entirely too much about each other. Did you think I was that stupid? Lauren started. I think you're reckless, I replied. She laughed. You think swapping the glasses was the end of it? Did you know that if you take a high dose of that stuff, it can cause cardiac arrest? A chill ran down my spine. So your plan was to put me into cardiac arrest in the middle of a corporate gala? Lauren was silent for a second, then spoke slowly. I only meant to humiliate you. I looked into her eyes. Humiliate me how? Lauren stood up. You climbed the ladder too fast, Vivian. Too fast for people's comfort. Because I earned it, I said. Lauren leaned in close to my face. Not just because of that. What do you mean? She smiled. Why do you think the new CEO took such a sudden interest in you on his very first night? I stood frozen. Lauren stared at me for a few more seconds before turning on her heel and leaving my apartment. The door clicked shut. Her question echoed in my mind. Why did Thomas know everything? Why did the cameras go blind? And why was he paying so much attention to me? I stepped out onto my fire escape. The city beneath me was glowing, but inside me, a different kind of darkness was spreading. This chess game wasn't just about me and Lauren. I was starting to realize the most dangerous player on the board might not be her at all. Lauren's departure left a heavy silence, like a stone pressing on my chest. Her final words played on a loop. Why do you think the new CEO took such a sudden interest in you? I sat down on my sofa, staring at the untouched glass of water on the coffee table. My hands were shaking slightly. I had always thought I was the one controlling my narrative, making proactive career moves. But the deeper I got, the more I felt like someone had been watching me for a very long time. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas standing in the 27th floor hallway, his gaze piercing right through me. He wasn't surprised when I swapped the glasses. He said he was in the VIP lounge and saw it all. But why was he exactly there at that exact moment? And why didn't he stop Lauren? The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The floor was sparse. I booted up my Mac, but my mind couldn't focus on the financial models on the screen. Around 8:30 a.m., Lauren walked in. She wore a pristine white power suit, her hair pulled back tightly, immaculate makeup hiding her fatigue. She walked past my desk without looking, but I felt the heat of her glare. 10 minutes later, I got a Slack notification. Vivian, conference room 3. Now. Walking in, I saw Preston already seated. Thomas stood by the window, his back to us. Lauren sat opposite Preston, hands folded on the oak table. The door closed. Thomas turned around, his voice low. Lauren has filed a formal grievance with HR. She claims she was set up. I looked at Lauren. She met my gaze with total apathy. She states someone spiked her drink, Thomas continued, and that this person had a personal motive. The air thickened. A personal motive? I asked. Lauren's lips curled into a sneer. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Preston chimed in. Vivian, you and Lauren have a history. The whole office knows Michael used to be your boyfriend. I gripped the fabric of my skirt under the table. My personal life has nothing to do with illegal narcotics. Lauren let out a soft laugh. Doesn't it? Weren't you resentful? Didn't you want payback? Payback by sending you to the ER? I fired back. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have swapped the glasses. The words slipped out before I could bite my tongue. The room went dead silent. Preston stared at me, wide-eyed. Lauren flinched. Thomas showed no emotion. He simply asked, "What do you mean by that?" I took a deep breath. I mean, if I had malicious intent, I would have just let everything play out exactly as the person who spiked the drink intended. Lauren turned pale. Are you implying I did it? I'm not implying anything. I stared her down. I'm just wondering how you knew your glass had a problem. A heavy, suffocating silence. Preston slammed his hand on the table. Enough. This isn't a courtroom for you two to bicker. Thomas raised a hand, silencing Preston. He looked at Lauren. Do you have any proof you were framed? Lauren shook her head. No, but I believe someone wants me out of the picture. Belief isn't enough, Thomas said. I need facts. Lauren stood up abruptly. You're taking her side, Thomas replied slowly. I take the side of evidence. The meeting ended with the tension strung as tight as piano wire. Walking out, my heart felt like lead. I knew the moment I slipped up and mentioned the swapped glasses, I had stepped deeper into the quicksand. At lunch, I was eating a quick salad at my desk when Michael appeared. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 months. He looked thinner, his eyes avoiding mine. Viv, can we talk? He asked, quietly. I put my fork down. What do you want? Michael glanced around nervously and pulled me toward the elevator bank. Lauren is furious. She thinks you did this on purpose. I don't care what she thinks, I said. Michael sighed. You don't get it. She's not going to let this go. And you? I asked. Whose side are you on? He stayed silent. The answer was obvious. Michael, I said slowly. When you chose Lauren, you picked a side. Don't play Switzerland now. He looked down. I just don't want you to get in trouble. I'm already in it. I turned my back. And I'll handle it myself. That afternoon, I received an email from HR. I was being reassigned to report directly to Thomas for the new Hudson Yards project. That meant I was no longer under Lauren's jurisdiction. The whole floor was gossiping. Lauren marched straight to my cubicle. Congratulations. Climbing fast, she sneered. I just do the work, I replied. She leaned over the partition, her voice like ice. You think Thomas is protecting you? Keep dreaming. I looked at her without flinching. I don't need anyone's protection. You'll learn, Lauren whispered. That night, as I was packing up, Thomas called my cell. Come up to the roof for a minute. I took the elevator up. The wind on the Manhattan rooftop was fierce. Thomas was standing by the parapet, looking down at the grid of traffic. You're reckless, he said as I approached. I don't like being framed, I replied. You just put a massive target on your own back. He turned to look at me. Lauren isn't the type to take a loss. Neither am I. Thomas was quiet for a moment before asking, Did you ever wonder why Lauren had the guts to do that in the middle of a crowded gala? I have, I said. I assume she believes she has serious backing. Preston. Thomas nodded. But not just that. I looked at him. What do you know? He crossed his arms. I'm running a quiet internal audit. Not just about Lauren's HR issue, but financials. Financials? I was surprised. There are dark spots in the budgets for projects overseen by Lauren and Preston, he said. If she gets ousted, a lot of skeletons will fall out of the closet. It clicked. The drugged wine wasn't just petty jealousy over Michael. Lauren wanted me out because I was getting too close to the major accounts. Do you suspect I'm involved in the financials? I asked. No. Thomas looked me in the eye. I gave a cynical laugh. Are you looking out for me? Or are you using me? He didn't answer immediately. The wind blew my hair across my face. Thomas reached out as if to tuck it behind my ear, but stopped midway. I don't want you becoming a casualty, he said softly. Whose casualty? I asked. Of this chessboard. We stood in silence, looking down at the city. I suddenly realized that since the night of the gala, everything had transcended typical office politics. When I got back to my apartment, my phone buzzed. Another anonymous text. Think you're so smart? Check your personal email. My chest tightened. I opened Gmail. There was an attachment, a high-resolution photo of me and Thomas standing close together on the rooftop, taken from a distance. The angle made it look like we were intimately close. Beneath the photo was a caption: "New project director and the CEO. Guess merit has nothing to do with it." My blood ran cold. Someone was gearing up for a smear campaign. I stared at the screen. I knew if this leaked, everything I had worked for would be reduced to a cheap tabloid rumor, and the person who stood to gain the most was Lauren. But a different instinct flared up. If Lauren wanted to ruin me, she would have CC'd the entire company. Sending it directly to me was a warning, a scare tactic. Who was pulling the strings? I texted Thomas. "Are you still at the office?" He replied instantly. "What's wrong?" I looked at the photo again. The chessboard was expanding, and I was no longer sure who was an ally and who was an enemy. I analyzed the picture. The angle was from behind the rooftop water tower, slightly elevated. That meant the photographer was on the roof with us, or had access to a private security feed. I texted Thomas back. "I received something. I need to see you now." 5 minutes later, I was back in the corporate lobby, swiping my badge. Thomas was in his corner office on the top floor. He had taken off his suit jacket, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He saw my face. What happened? I put my phone on his mahogany desk, spinning the screen toward him. Thomas's eyes darkened. "Sent from an untraceable number?" he asked. "Proton mail," I replied. "Only sent to me." He was silent. "Processing it. If they wanted to destroy you, it'd be on the company intranet by now." "So what is this?" "A stress test," Thomas said. "To see if you'll crack. Or to test my reaction." "Who do you suspect?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin manila folder. 3 days ago, I had the IT forensics team sweep the internal camera grid. An admin account accessed the rooftop feed illegally tonight. "Preston?" "No." Thomas shook his head. "The account belonged to IT." I froze. "You mean there's a third party involved?" "Nobody operates in a vacuum here," Thomas said. "Lauren might be impulsive, but deleting footage, taking surveillance shots, using burner emails, that takes infrastructure." I sat in the leather chair opposite him, my mind spinning. "So, what do they want?" "They want you terrified," Thomas said. "They want you to resign." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "I don't fold that easily." Thomas studied me, his voice dropping an octave. "Vivian, from this moment on, every step you take has to be calculated. Do not be alone with me for too long." I paused. "You're afraid of the rumors." "I don't give a damn about rumors," he said fiercely. "I care that you could be collateral damage." I didn't know why those words made my heart skip a beat. Maybe because, for the longest time, no one had prioritized my well-being in this cutthroat city. "Thank you," I said softly. He didn't reply, just looked away as if afraid his eyes would betray too much. The next morning, the whispers began. The photo hadn't leaked widely, but in the break room, I caught snippets. "See? Vivian got promoted so fast for a reason. The new CEO definitely has a favorite." I walked in, and the chatter died instantly. Lauren was by the window, holding a Yeti tumbler. She gave me a challenging look. "Busy bee," Lauren said. "Up to the executive floor every morning." "I'm reporting on the project," I said smoothly. "What kind of project requires late-night private reports?" She smirked. I didn't react. I knew feeding the troll only made it stronger. Lauren took a step closer, dropping her voice. "You should remember that in corporate America, optics matter more than competence." "I remember," I replied, "since you've always used optics to climb your way up." Lauren's face hardened, but she didn't blow up. She just gave a hollow, lifeless smile. That afternoon, a sudden memo went out. The Hudson Yards project deliverables were moved up by a full week. A brutal, artificial crunch. I knew exactly who was applying the pressure. I stayed at the office until almost 10 p.m. When I finally walked out, the bullpen was a ghost town. My cell phone rang. It was my mother, calling from upstate New York. "How are you doing, sweetie? You sound so busy." Her comforting voice came through. I leaned against the hallway wall, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "I'm okay, Mom." "Don't work yourself to the bone. Health is what matters," she scolded gently. "And don't let those city folks push you around." My throat tightened. "I know, Mom. If something's wrong, tell me," she pressed. "You're all alone down there. I worry." I looked down at the polished floor, seeing my own tired reflection. "I can handle it, Mom. Don't worry." Hanging up, I took a deep breath. I couldn't collapse. Not now. When I got down to the parking garage, Michael was standing by my car. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm exhausted." I unlocked the door. "Lauren is drafting a formal complaint to the board of directors," Michael spoke fast. "She's officially accusing you of corporate sabotage." I gave a cynical laugh. "Are you playing her knight in shining armor? Or are you trying to help me? I just don't want this to blow up," Michael pleaded. "If you just apologize, she might drop it." "Apologize for something I didn't do?" Michael fell silent, a flash of guilt in his eyes. "Michael," I said, spacing my words out. "You know exactly who spiked my drink that night." He flinched. I can't be sure." "You are sure," I said. "And you're still standing beside her." Michael looked at his shoes. "I owe her. I don't owe anybody." I pulled the car door open, and I refused to kneel just because someone is threatening me. I drove through the Lincoln Tunnel, my mind racing. If Lauren escalated this to the board, an external investigation would happen. My slip-up about swapping glasses would be weaponized against me. I got home, booted up my laptop, and began drafting a meticulously detailed sworn statement of the gala. Every timestamp, every location, every detail. I couldn't let them control the narrative. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "Are you asleep?" "No, I just got word," he said. "They've reached out to a legacy board member. They're going to apply institutional pressure." "I figured," I said. "Are you scared?" I was quiet for a moment. "Yes, but I'm not backing down." I heard him exhale softly over the line. "Good." The sound of wind rushed through his microphone. "Where are you?" I asked. "On the roof." I looked out my window at the illuminated Manhattan skyline. "Do you ever think you made the wrong choice?" "About what?" "Choosing to stand with me." He was silent for a long time. "I don't stand with anyone. I stand with what's right." "And what if doing what's right costs you the CEO title?" "Titles can be regained," Thomas said. "Integrity can't." Those words settled the chaos in my chest. The next morning, an email was blasted to the entire company. Lauren had formally requested an inquiry by the board of directors into my malicious conduct. The office was in an uproar. I walked straight into Thomas's office. He looked at me. "Ready?" "Always," I said. He nodded. "The tribunal is in 3 days." 3 days. 3 days for them to fabricate evidence. 3 days for me to brace myself. Walking out of his office, I saw Lauren at the end of the hall. She looked at me, her eyes screaming. "The games have just begun." I stared right back. The gala was just the prologue. Now, it wasn't just a catfight between two managers. It was a war between truth and the invisible hands, trying to bury it. And I knew. If I fell now, I would never get back up. The 3 days leading up to the tribunal felt like a suffocating marathon. The entire corporate headquarters was tense. Everyone pretended to be slammed with work, but the voyeuristic glances were impossible to hide. Lauren didn't hide at all. She showed up to the office every day, dressed to the nines, terrifyingly calm. Occasionally, she'd loudly complain about workplace ethics and defending her professional reputation. She was meticulously crafting her victim narrative. On the second afternoon, I received a summons from General Counsel, demanding a comprehensive incident report regarding the gala. I already had it prepared. My report was nearly 10 pages long. It documented every detail I could recall. I didn't hide the fact that I swapped the glasses, but I explicitly stated why. I stated I suspected my drink was tampered with and didn't want to cause public hysteria without concrete proof. Writing those words, my hands shook slightly. I knew admitting to the swap was a double-edged sword, but if I lied and a shred of evidence surfaced, I'd be terminated for cause immediately. That evening, I was staying late to review the Hudson Yards financial models. A knock at my cubicle. Preston walked in. "Still grinding?" he asked. "I have deadlines," I said curtly. Preston pulled up a chair. "Vivian, I'm going to shoot straight with you. You're walking into a buzzsaw." I'm defending myself. "Lauren is willing to take this further than you can imagine," Preston said smoothly. "If this reaches the legacy board members, nobody can protect you. Not even Thomas." "Is that a threat?" He shook his head. "It's advice." I looked him dead in the eye. "You were at that table. You saw what Lauren did." Preston said nothing. "You also know the server footage was wiped," I pressed. "And you have executive clearance." Preston chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "You really are a smart girl. Not smart enough to self-sabotage," I countered. He leaned back, studying me for a long time. "If I told you I didn't wipe those servers, would you believe me?" "I'd believe you didn't do it alone," I shot back. Preston paused, then stood up. "Vivian, there are currents in this building you don't understand. Stop digging. I'm going to hit the bottom," I said. Preston looked at me one last time, a mix of anger and pity in his eyes. "Then, you're on your own." He walked out, leaving my heart pounding against my ribs. I knew I had just poked a bear much larger than a jealous supervisor. The morning of the tribunal, I wore a simple charcoal blazer and minimal makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, an employee fighting for her livelihood. The top-floor boardroom was packed. Thomas sat at the head of the table. Next to him was the chief legal officer and 2 senior board members who had flown in from Chicago. Lauren sat across from me, serene. The hearing commenced. General counsel read Lauren's grievance. She asserted that I harbored a personal vendetta because of her relationship with Michael, and that I had intentionally swapped the glasses to poison her with a narcotic. When asked for a statement, Lauren stood up. "I admit Vivian and I have some personal friction," she said softly, playing the diplomat. "But I would never wish harm on a colleague. I believe a third party exploited our tension to cause a scandal." I listened without breaking my expression. She was masterfully deflecting suspicion onto a phantom scapegoat. Then it was my turn. I stood up, holding my printed report. "I do not deny swapping the glasses," I stated clearly. The room broke into murmurs. "I swapped them because I had reasonable suspicion my drink was compromised." "On what grounds?" a Chicago board member asked. "I saw Lauren handling a small packet near our table," I replied. "I couldn't verify its contents, but I wasn't willing to risk my safety." Lauren shot up. "That is defamation!" "I didn't say what you put in it." I turned to her. "I said I was suspicious." Thomas raised a hand for order. "Do you have evidence?" the CLO asked. "I don't have video," I said. "But I have this." I unlocked my phone and cast the screen to the boardroom monitor. The anonymous text: "Swapped the glasses pretty fast." The room went dead silent. "I received this immediately upon leaving the venue," I said. "Someone saw me, and they were watching." Thomas looked at the IT director present. "Can we trace it?" "Spoofed VoIP number." The IT head shook his head. "Untraceable," Lauren scoffed. "An anonymous text proves nothing." That night, the surveillance footage for the banquet area was wiped for exactly 20 minutes. I continued. If I was the mastermind trying to poison my boss, I wouldn't need to wipe the cameras to hide her actions. That sentence hung heavy over the room. Thomas spoke up. "IT Forensics has confirmed unauthorized admin access to the servers. An active investigation is underway." Preston sat perfectly still, but I could see a bead of sweat forming at his temple. The tribunal lasted nearly 3 hours. Ultimately, The board decided to reserve judgment, pending a deeper forensic audit. Lauren was placed on paid administrative leave. And while I kept my job, I was placed under strict supervisory review. As Lauren packed her briefcase, she glared at me. "You're not done yet," she hissed. "Neither am I," I replied. That afternoon, back at my desk, exhaustion hit me like a freight train, but a fraction of the weight had lifted. I wasn't fired. Thomas walked over after the floor cleared out. "You did well," he said. "I just told the truth." He looked at me deeply. "It takes guts to tell the truth when it could cost you everything." "I don't want to live looking over my shoulder," I said. Thomas lingered. "Go home early tonight." "Rest." I nodded. On my drive back to Brooklyn, my phone rang. An unknown New York number. "Is this Vivian?" An older man's voice asked. "I'm Quincy. I was an old friend of your father's." My heart skipped a beat. "My father passed away 10 years ago," I said. "I know." Quincy's voice was gravelly. "But there are things concerning your family, and they tie directly into the firm you're working for." I gripped the steering wheel tight. "We need to meet," he said. After I hung up, I sat in my parked car for a long time, from a spiked glass of wine to a corporate tribunal, and now a man claiming to know my dead father. The pieces were connecting into a terrifying web. I looked up at the Manhattan skyline. The city was glowing. But inside me, a new storm was brewing. This war was no longer just about my career. I barely slept. "I was an old friend of your father's." The words echoed in my skull. My dad had died when I was in high school. My memories of him were of a quiet man who worked long hours, patted my head before bed, and smoked silently on the porch. My mom never talked much about his career, only that he was an executive who abruptly quit, got sick, and passed away. I thought it was just a tragic, simple story. But now, amidst a corporate scandal, an old friend appears saying my family is tied to my firm. There are no coincidences in New York. The next morning, I texted Uncle Quinn to meet at a quiet diner in Queens, far from the office. I didn't tell anyone, not even Thomas. Quincy was already in a booth. He looked to be in his late 60s, gray hair, wearing a simple flannel shirt. When I walked up, he stared at me for a long time. "You have your father's eyes," he said gruffly. I slid into the booth, trying to keep my composure. "You said you knew him. We worked on a major development project together." Quincy nodded. "Almost 20 years ago." I waited. "That project was later acquired by the conglomerate you work for now," he said slowly. "Did you know that?" I shook my head. "No." He sighed heavily. "He didn't want you to know. He was afraid you'd get dragged into the old bad blood." My chest tightened. "Why?" "Because you're already in it." He looked at me gravely. "I hear things. I heard what happened at the gala. Somebody mentioned your father's name." I flinched. "Who?" "Preston," Quincy said flatly. I felt a chill freeze my blood. "You were there?" "I was invited as a legacy contractor," he replied. "I overheard Preston telling Lauren that you were his daughter, and you couldn't be allowed to climb the ladder." My hands shook under the table. "Who is his?" "Your father." Quincy looked me in the eye. "Your dad was partners with the founder of your firm. A massive deal went south, and they severed ties completely." "How did it go south?" "A lot of money vanished," Quincy said. "Everyone pinned it on your dad." I stared at him. "But he didn't say anything to defend himself?" "He never explained," Quincy sighed. "He just took the hit and walked away." A surge of anger and grief swelled inside me. My father wasn't greedy. He might have been flawed, maybe naive, but he wasn't an embezzler. "Do you believe he didn't do it?" I asked. Quincy looked at me like he was reading my mind. "I believe he didn't, but some people didn't care about the truth." Preston was just a junior analyst back then," Quincy said. "But he was the founder's lapdog." I remembered Preston's cold eyes in the boardroom. His warnings. So the feud between me and Lauren was just the tip of the iceberg. I left the diner with my mind in a knot. Driving back into Manhattan, I couldn't stop thinking, if my dad was the scapegoat, does my sudden rise to project director terrify the people who set him up? That afternoon, I marched straight to Thomas's office and knocked. He saw my face and instantly knew something had shifted. "What is it?" "I need to ask you something," I said. "Ask." "My father used to work with this conglomerate, didn't he?" Thomas paused, but didn't look away. "Yes. A massive amount of money went missing." I pushed. "And they blamed him." Thomas looked at me for a long time. "Who told you?" "Quincy. An old friend of his." Thomas exhaled slowly. "That happened before I took the CEO seat. But I've seen the archives. Do you believe my father stole it?" I demanded. He didn't answer immediately. "I believe every story has two sides. I'm not asking for a PR answer, Thomas. I'm asking you." Thomas stood up and walked around the desk to face me. "I don't have proof he took the money, but I don't have proof he didn't." I fell silent. I turned away, a bitter disappointment flooding me. "So to you, I'm just a liability carrying the last name of an embezzler." "Vivian," Thomas called out, "I don't judge you by your father's past, but everyone else does," I replied. I told him what Quincy had heard, about Preston mentioning me at the gala, wanting to keep me down. Thomas's eyes darkened. "If that's true, the spiked drink was just phase one." "Phase one of what?" "Pushing you out of the firm," he said. "Before you find out too much." I shivered. "About what?" "The legacy projects," he replied. "The missing money." I collapsed into a chair, my head spinning. Me being assigned the Hudson Yards project meant I would have high-level access to historical financial models. "Preston has legacy access," Thomas mused aloud. "If he's terrified of a skeleton being unearthed, he'd want you gone. By using Lauren?" "Highly probable," he said. I looked up at him. "Are you on my side?" The question slipped out before I could filter it. Thomas looked down at me, his eyes unfathomable. "I'm on the side of the truth. And what if the truth damages the conglomerate? Then the conglomerate will have to bleed," he said slowly. I didn't know how much to trust him, but he wasn't backing down. That night, when I returned to my apartment, a manila envelope was shoved under my door. No return address. I tore it open. Inside was a photocopy of a 20-year-old corporate contract. At the bottom was my father's signature. In the bottom right corner, scribbled in red Sharpie, were the words, "Missing $5 million." My hands trembled. This wasn't office politics. This wasn't petty jealousy. This was a 20-year-old debt. My phone buzzed. An unknown text. "Want the truth? Trust no one." I looked around my apartment, feeling the phantom weight of being watched. The gala had opened a door, and behind it wasn't just Preston or Lauren, but a conspiracy spanning 2 decades, and I, the daughter of the fall guy, was standing right in the crosshairs. I sank onto the hardwood floor, the envelope in my lap, the photocopy mocking me. "Missing $5 million." My father had signed the bottom. I recognized the signature instantly, bold, slanted sharply to the right. When I was a kid, I used to practice forging it. He'd tap me on the head and laugh. "You don't need to sign like me, Viv. You need a signature of your own." I never imagined that signature would become the centerpiece of a corporate felony. The text "Trust no one" was still glaring on my screen. I stood up, triple-locked my deadbolt, and took the papers into my bedroom. I scanned everything into an encrypted cloud folder. If they wanted to scare me, it was working. But fear doesn't mean surrender. The next morning, I didn't go to the office right away. I called my mom. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "What's wrong, honey?" "Back in the day, who did Dad do business with? Was there a fallout over money?" The line went dead silent for a suffocating 5 seconds. "Why are you asking this?" "I just need to know." I kept my voice steady. Someone brought up his past. My mom sighed, a sound of deep, old exhaustion. "Your father partnered with a friend. There was a misunderstanding. They said money went missing, but your father never defended himself. Why? He said even if he explained it, no one would believe him. She replied. So he chose silence. My heart broke. Did you believe him, Mom? Your father could be a failure, she said with fierce conviction. But he was never a thief. I know it. I hung up with a lump in my throat. If he didn't take it, where did the $5 million go? I arrived at the office late. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. Lauren was still suspended, but Preston was operating at full throttle. He stood in the bullpen, loudly discussing transparency and corporate restructuring. When he saw me, he stopped. Vivian. My office. I followed him in. The door shut. He tossed a file onto his desk. Do you know what this is? I looked down. It was the original 20-year-old contract. Where did you get this? I demanded. Corporate archives, Preston said. Are you taking a sudden interest in your father's legacy? I said nothing. Preston leaned back. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Don't go digging up graves. Some things are buried for a reason. Why? I challenged. Because it won't end well for you. Or the company. Or for you? I shot back. Preston's eyes narrowed. You suspect me. I suspect everyone, I said. He gave a dark laugh. You really are your father's daughter. A chill went down my spine. You worked with him. I did, Preston nodded. And I watched him tank an entire development. He took the cash. Did he? I asked coldly. Preston paused. The money vanished. He was the CFO of the joint venture. But I don't have a smoking gun. You have nothing, I said. And he never confessed. I walked out of his office feeling nauseous. Preston's words, my mom's faith. Uncle Quinn's warnings, they were a tangled mess of lies and half-truths. At noon, Thomas called me up. You're digging into the past, he stated. I won't live in the dark, I replied. What did Preston say? I don't trust him, I said. Thomas nodded. I've ordered forensic accounting to reopen the old archives. I looked at him, stunned. Why are you helping me? Because if there's rot in the foundation, I need to excise it, he said. And I refuse to let you get dragged under for your father's ghost. Are you afraid of what you'll find? I asked. He smirked. Terrified. But if you don't face the monster, it controls you. By late afternoon, an internal memo leaked. A surprise forensic audit of legacy projects was initiated. Panic spread like wildfire. Preston stormed out of his office, his face like thunder, his eyes slashing at me as he walked past. That night, leaving the building, I noticed a black SUV idling a few yards from the exit. I walked faster. It didn't follow me, but the paranoia was suffocating. Back in Brooklyn, another anonymous text. If you want to know where the $5M went, look at the subsidiary ledger from that year. I jumped. The sender knew about the audit. I texted back, Who are you? No reply. It was almost 11 p.m. I hesitated, then called Thomas. Can you get me the subsidiary ledgers for my dad's project? Silence. What just happened? I can't say over the phone, I said. Give me 30 minutes. Meet me in the underground parking garage, he ordered. When I got to the sub-level garage, Thomas was leaning against his car. Someone is tracking you, he said immediately. Cybersecurity flagged anomalous pings on your HR file. I showed him the text. He read it, jaw clenching. They want you to keep digging, he said. Why? Maybe they want you to unearth the bomb so they don't have to, he replied. Or they're using me as bait, I added. Thomas stared at me intensely. Do you want to stop? I thought of my dad, my mom, the signature. No, I said with absolute certainty. If my father was framed, I will burn it down to find out, he nodded. I'll get you the ledgers. But from this second on, no rogue ops. Is that an order from the CEO? It's a plea from me, he said. I didn't argue. Standing in the dim, fluorescent light of the parking garage, I realized this had escalated far beyond a spiked drink. I was in the deep end, and the predators were circling. The garage was so quiet I could hear the hum of the concrete infrastructure. Thomas popped the passenger door of his Audi. He didn't turn on the engine, just the overhead dome light. The harsh white glow made his features look sharper, more dangerous. I had finance pull the raw data logs, he said quietly. The paper records in the archive were doctored. My grip tightened on my purse. Doctored? There's an second filed master copy and an internal copy, he explained. The numbers don't match. $5 million, Thomas nodded. In the internal files, the shortfall is written off as an unforeseen market contingency. But in the banking logs, it was wired to a private LLC. Ice flooded my veins. My dad's account? Thomas looked at me, his eyes heavy. No, I exhaled sharply. Then whose? He handed me a folded printout. The wire transfer listed a shell company. Below it was the managing director of that LLC, Preston. The ambient noise of the garage faded into a vacuum. That's impossible, I muttered. At the time, Preston was the financial liaison, Thomas said slowly. He had proxy signatory power. I remembered Quincy's words. Preston was the founder's lapdog. My dad was the CFO, but he didn't personally execute every wire. If the money went to an LLC managed by Preston, why did my dad take the fall? I demanded. Because the internal records were falsified, Thomas said, and the person who falsified them had supreme executive override. I stared at him. You mean the founder? He didn't speak. The silence was louder than a confession. Your father, I whispered. He's stepped down, but he still controls the board. I leaned back against the leather seat, my reality fracturing. 20 years ago, the money vanishes. My dad stays silent and takes the blame. Preston gets promoted. And now I, the daughter of the scapegoat, am inadvertently handed the keys to the vault, the Gala, the roofies. They wanted me fired in disgrace before I could see this, I said. Very likely, Thomas said. Does Lauren know? Hard to say. If Preston is manipulating her, she's just a pawn. I remembered Lauren's desperate threat. You're not done yet. If she was just a hired gun, the petty rivalry was nothing but a smokescreen. What are you going to do? I asked. I need airtight proof, Thomas said. If I strike at the board and miss, I lose the company. And me? You're already on the board, he said. There's no backing out. I got out of the car, the smell of exhaust and damp concrete filling my lungs. I looked up at the skyscraper above us. So many lights, so many lies. When I got to my apartment, I sat in the dark. My dad stayed silent to protect us from the blowback, but his silence branded him a thief until his dying day. I wouldn't repeat his mistake. The next morning, I walked into the lobby with a different kind of armor. I wasn't just fighting Lauren anymore. I was fighting for my father. Preston was waiting near the elevator banks. Early bird, he remarked. I have work to do. He scrutinized me. You look different. I grew up, I said. Preston gave a patronizing smile. Don't think Thomas can play White Knight forever. I don't need a knight, I fired back. I just need the data. His eye twitched, barely perceptible. At lunch, Lauren suddenly appeared at the office, defying her suspension. She marched straight into Preston's office and slammed the door. I walked past, catching glimpses through the frosted glass. They were arguing violently. Lauren slammed her hands on the desk. Preston shook his head. 10 minutes later, she stormed out, looking sickly pale. She stopped when she saw me. What the hell did you do? She hissed. I'm just doing my job. You think digging up ancient history makes you a hero? Her voice cracked. I haven't said a word to you, I replied calmly. Lauren looked frantic. Preston is in deep trouble. I didn't put him there. She let out a bitter laugh. You think he did everything for himself? I froze. For the conglomerate? For people you don't even understand, she snapped, before turning on her heel and leaving. Later that afternoon, Thomas called me. Preston just filed for an indefinite leave of absence. That's convenient. He knows we're close, Thomas said. Are you going to confront him? Not without the smoking gun, he replied. But I've frozen all his associated corporate accounts. I looked at the phone. You're risking your neck. What? I know. I realized then that Thomas was betting his entire empire on this. That night, my cell rang. Caller ID. Preston. I hesitated, then picked up. Do you want the truth? He asked bluntly. Always. Then meet me. Alone. His voice was gravel. If you don't show, you'll never know where the $5 million went. He added. Then hung up. I knew it could be a trap, but I had to know. I texted Thomas. Meeting Preston. He called me instantly. Absolutely not. I need the answers, I said. You don't know what a cornered animal will do, Thomas argued. Neither do you, I replied. But I can handle myself. I hung up, looked in the mirror, and grabbed my coat. I was no longer the junior exec begging for a promotion. I was the ghost of 20 years past. Coming to collect. I arrived at the location 10 minutes early. It was a grimy dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, neon signs buzzing erratically through the foggy window. I stood on the sidewalk, wondering why Preston chose this dump. My phone buzzed. Thomas. I'm 2 blocks away. If anything feels wrong, call. I ignored it. I didn't want him interfering, even if his presence was a safety net. I pushed the heavy door open. The place smelled of stale beer and bleach. Preston was sitting in a dark corner booth, back to the wall, a neat scotch, untouched in front of him. He looked like he had aged 10 years. You actually came, he said. I slid into the booth across from him. Talk. You think I stole the $5 million? He said. I think you know exactly whose pocket it ended up in. He gave a dark, humorless laugh. You're just like your old man. Thinking a straight question gets a straight answer. My father wasn't a thief, I said, voice like ice. I didn't say he was a thief, Preston replied. I said he was a fool. I tightened my jaw. Excuse me? He trusted the wrong people, Preston said slowly. Trusted them so much he walked right into the slaughterhouse. Whose slaughterhouse? Preston took a sip of the scotch. The chairman emeritus. The founder. He needed liquid capital to secretly bail out a failing offshore acquisition. The joint venture money was drained as a bridge loan. He promised to put it back in 30 days. My heart hammered against my ribs. And my dad knew? Your dad signed the authorizations because he trusted him, Preston said. Then why did the wire go to your LLC? Preston sneered. I was a proxy, a glorified bagman. The founder controlled the accounts. You think I could say no to the man writing my paychecks? And when the money couldn't be replaced? He needed a fall guy, Preston stated. Your dad was the perfect martyr. You knew the truth and let them destroy him? Preston looked exhausted. I had no proof. The paper trail was sanitized. And I wasn't about to commit career suicide. What about human decency? I snapped. Preston stared at me. Decency doesn't pay a mortgage in Manhattan. I stood up, disgusted. You called me here just to tell me you're a coward? I called you here to warn you that this is bigger than me. Preston hissed. If you keep digging, you're going to hit the chairman emeritus. And Thomas is his son, Preston barked. You think he doesn't know? I froze. He's trying to fix it. Ask yourself. Preston leaned forward. Why did Thomas suddenly promote you? Why did he greenlight the audit? Maybe he's cleaning up his father's mess. Or maybe he's managing the blast radius before you detonate. You're shifting the blame, I said. I'm telling you how this city works, Preston replied. The money isn't in my bank account. The proof was shredded decades ago, just like the camera footage from the Gala. Did you wipe the footage? I demanded. Preston's eyes went cold. No. Lauren? She's a pawn. Preston scoffed. You think she has the brains to orchestrate a server wipe? I sat back down, head spinning. If you're innocent of the cover-up, why take a leave of absence? Because the audit is going to frame me, Preston said. I'm the designated survivor. I'm terrified of the man standing behind you. Thomas? Preston didn't answer. He dropped a $50 bill on the table. You want the truth? Asked the golden boy. He walked out, leaving me alone in the flickering neon light. I sat there, trying to piece the fractured puzzle together. If the founders stole the money, and my dad was the scapegoat, and Thomas is the founder's son, is Thomas using the audit to genuinely expose the truth, or to permanently bury it? I walked out of the bar into the biting wind. My phone rang. Are you okay? Thomas asked instantly. I heard a very different story tonight, I said. What did Preston say? He said you're the founder's son. I said bluntly. The line went dead silent. The silence stretched so long I could hear the city traffic blaring around me. Yes, Thomas finally said. My stomach plummeted. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you looking at me through the lens of my father's sins. And you knew about the 5 million. I knew there was a dispute, Thomas said. I didn't know the anatomy of the crime. Do you believe my father was innocent? A heavy pause. I believe he didn't steal a dime. It wasn't a full exoneration, but it wasn't a lie either. I'm not your enemy, Vivian, Thomas continued. I am trying to tear down the rot my predecessor built. I need the objective truth, I said. So do I. I looked up at the towering skyscrapers. I'm not stopping. I'm not asking you to, Thomas replied. But from now on, you are playing with live ammo. The call ended. Preston told me to trust no one. The anonymous texts said the same, but standing alone in the cold, thinking of my father's forged signature and Thomas's steady voice, I knew that sometimes, to win a war, you have to leap in the dark. I returned to my apartment past midnight. It was pitch black. Only the ambient orange glow of the streetlights, painting long shadows across my floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I leaned against the heavy wooden door, letting the darkness swallow me for a minute. Thomas is the founder's son. I had considered it. A brilliant young executive suddenly handed the keys to the kingdom, carrying himself with a mix of ruthless authority and guarded caution. But hearing him admit it changed the gravity of the room. I pulled out my phone and stared at the anonymous text. Trust no one, not even Thomas. I sat on my sofa and closed my eyes. I recalled his face in the parking garage when he handed me the wire transfer logs implicating Preston. If he wanted to cover his family's tracks, he never would have handed me that paper. But if he wanted total control of the narrative, feeding me breadcrumbs was the perfect strategy. The next morning, I walked into the corporate headquarters with absolute clarity. I was going to confront him. Thomas was in his private conference room when I knocked. Come in. I shut the door and locked it. You know, I met with Preston. I assumed. He didn't break eye contact. I need you to go on the record, I said. How much do you know about the 5 million? Thomas was silent for a few seconds. He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Central Park. My father is a man of boundless ambition, he said quietly. He built this conglomerate out of dirt. But ambition makes men rationalize atrocities, like gambling with other people's money and other people's reputations. I corrected. He turned slightly. Yes. He told me once that executives have to make impossible choices to keep the ship afloat, Thomas continued. But I never knew the specifics of who he threw overboard. Didn't you ever ask? I was young, he said, and a son never wants to believe his father is a monster. I stepped closer. And now? He turned to face me fully, his eyes dark and resolved. Now, I want the truth to see the light. Why? Because I refuse to govern an empire built on a lie, even if proving he took the money and framed my dad destroys your family name. Thomas didn't hesitate. I will publish the findings, even if it crashes the stock, even if it ruins me. His voice didn't shake. I didn't know how much of it to believe, but his conviction was palpable. Preston said you're just doing damage control before I blow the whistle, I said. Thomas gave a hollow laugh. If I wanted damage control, I would have fired you with severance 3 months ago. That stopped me. Why do you think I assigned you the Hudson Yards portfolio? He asked. Merit. Partly, he said. But also because I knew exactly who your father was. My breath hitched. You knew? Since when? Since I reviewed your hiring file. And you promoted me anyway? I wanted to see if you were like him, Thomas said softly. And what did you see? I saw that you weren't afraid, he whispered. And you don't stay silent like he did. My throat tightened. He stayed silent to protect his family. And my father claimed he did what he did to protect his company, Thomas replied. We stared at each other. Two children of two men bound by a 20-year-old crime, standing on opposite sides of the battlefield. Do you have hard proof your father ordered the wire? I asked. Not yet, he said. But I've ordered a complete declassification of the offshore banking records. He still has loyalists on the board. They know what I'm doing. That's why this has to be surgical. Suddenly, someone pounded on the glass door. Lauren burst in, looking frantic. We need to talk. She didn't even look at me. We're in a meeting, Thomas said coldly. This involves you, Lauren snapped. And her. I didn't move. Lauren finally turned to me. What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you know that if you leak this, the conglomerate will face federal indictments? I just want the truth, I said. The truth doesn't pay the salaries of 5,000 employees, she yelled. But a cover-up does? Lauren looked at me. A terrifying mix of rage and genuine fear in her eyes. You don't get it. Preston isn't the only one implicated. Half the Legacy board members signed off on it. You knew? I asked. She bit her lip. I heard Preston talking to the chairman emeritus. The chairman doesn't want this dug up. He's terrified of a shareholder revolt. So he knew, I stated. Lauren nodded slightly. The money was diverted to save an acquisition. I didn't know the details. I just wanted to climb the ladder. And you decided to use me as a stepping stone. Lauren gave a pathetic, broken laugh. I thought you were just an ambitious overachiever. I had no idea you were the ghost of Christmas past. I didn't either, I said. Lauren looked defeated. I don't have the stomach to fight the board. But if you do, I won't stand in your way. Do you have any proof? I asked. She shook her head. Just hearsay. She turned to leave. The old guard is moving to shut the audit down, Thomas. You need to brace yourself. As she left, Thomas's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and the color drained from his face. When? He asked the phone. I watched his pulse jump. He hung up. The board just filed an injunction to halt the forensic audit, he said. Why? Citing fiduciary risk to the corporation's public standing. I laughed bitterly. They're terrified. Yes. Are you going to stop? Thomas looked at me, his jaw set in stone. No. I knew in that second the Cold War was over. This wasn't about the $5 million anymore. It was a generational war. And Thomas and I, carrying the heavy legacies of our fathers, were walking straight into the hurricane. The board filed an injunction to halt the audit. Thomas's words sliced through the air like a guillotine. I searched his eyes for any sign of capitulation, any hint that the heir to the throne was going to fold. But there was none. His gaze wasn't that of a cautious CEO. It was the look of a man who had crossed the Rubicon. Did they call you directly? I asked. The chairman emeritus did, he replied. My father. I paused. He knows you're exhuming the past. He always knows, Thomas said slowly. Nothing moves in this building without his shadow. I stepped closer. What did he say? He said some things belong in the dark. And that I am destroying the house he built. I gave a cynical smile. A house built on someone else's grave. Thomas didn't argue. So what's the play? I asked. He walked back to his desk. I ordered IT and legal to hard copy and sequester all the data we've pulled so far. They can legally pause the official audit, but they cannot unsee what we've already extracted. Does Preston know? Probably, Thomas said. His leave of absence. is just him seeking asylum. But he still has votes. I look down at the chaotic Manhattan traffic. Do you ever think I'm the reason this whole thing went nuclear? Thomas came up beside me. You aren't the cause, Vivian. You're just the catalyst. I didn't want to burn the building down. But you lit the match, he replied, his words caught in my throat. I thought of my mom, her quiet tears on the phone. If this blew up publicly, the conglomerate would bleed. But my father's name would be dragged through the mud again before it was cleared. Would she survive that media circus? That afternoon, I got a text from Uncle Quinn. Did you hear the board is calling an emergency closed-door session? I called him immediately. What do you know? I still have friends in the C-suite, Quinn said. Word is they're going to pin the unauthorized wire entirely on Preston to neatly close the loop. What about my dad? I asked. If they don't explicitly clear him. The stigma remains forever, Quinn said. I gripped the phone. What should I do? You need a smoking gun in that room, kid. Not just a campfire story. I marched straight back into Thomas's office. They're going to throw Preston under the bus and call it a day. I anticipated that, Thomas said. Are you going to let them? If Preston executed the wire, he's legally culpable, he replied. But he was acting on your father's orders. Thomas fell silent. Are you willing to put your father under federal cross-examination? I demanded. Pain flashed in his eyes. He was a son, but he was also the CEO. He had to choose. I don't want to turn this into a public patricide on Wall Street, Thomas said softly, but if you stay quiet. My father dies a thief in the history books. He looked at me, torn. Give me time. I nodded, but I knew time was the one currency we were out of. That night Lauren called me. Where are you? My apartment. I'm coming over. She arrived wearing sweatpants and no makeup, looking like a shell of the untouchable executive she used to be. I want to end this, she said as she sat down. So do I replied. But the truth has to come out. Lauren looked at me. Do you honestly think you win if you take down the chairman emeritus? I don't care about winning. I care about clearing my dad's name. Lauren put her head in her hands. I spoke to Preston. He admitted the chairman ordered it. The chairman didn't want the shareholders to panic over a bad quarter, so he cannibalized the joint venture fund. Then why didn't you whistleblow? Because I'm not suicidal, she cried. I just wanted to make VP. I looked at her. I didn't see an enemy anymore. I just saw a woman trapped between her greed and her terror. Do you have anything tangible? I asked. Lauren shook her head. Just ghosts. She stood up to leave. I don't have the spine to fight the board. But if you're going to jump, I won't pull you back. After she left, my phone buzzed. It was Thomas. I've made a decision. I called him. What are you doing? I'm going to present the reopened files at the emergency board session tomorrow. Defying the injunction. Are you sure? I can't run a Fortune 500 company on a foundation of perjury, he said. I closed my eyes. A massive weight shifting in my chest. And your dad? I'm speaking to him tonight. I couldn't imagine what that conversation would be like. A son confronting his father. Not in a living room, but on the precipice of a corporate empire. The next morning, the notice for an emergency board of directors meeting hit the executive inboxes. The top floor was vibrating with anxiety. Preston suddenly reappeared in the building, looking like a cornered wolf. He intercepted me by the elevators. You've gone too far, he hissed. I only went to the places you were terrified of, I said calmly. You don't understand the collateral damage. Preston blocked my path. If the chairman goes down, the stock tanks, and heads will roll, so my father should just bear the cross forever? Preston fell silent. You told me decency doesn't pay a mortgage, I said, stepping past him. But I don't live on your payroll. I walked toward the boardroom. The heavy oak doors were waiting. I didn't know if I was walking into a victory or an execution, but there was no turning back. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom clicked shut behind me. Inside, the air was so dense you could hear the rustle of a single sheet of paper. Thomas stood at the head of the massive mahogany table. Opposite him sat 7 senior members of the board of directors, and occupying the dead center was a man with silver hair and eyes as sharp as cut glass. Richard, the chairman emeritus. Thomas's father. I took a seat in the gallery section against the wall. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to witness. We have convened today to address the reopening of the legacy financial audit. Thomas began, his voice baritone and unyielding, and the unresolved liabilities attached to it. An older board member scoffed. That was 20 years ago. There is zero fiduciary upside to exhuming it. There is the upside of institutional integrity. Thomas countered. Richard didn't say a word. He just stared at his son. Are you attempting to drag family drama into a shareholder proxy? Another member asked. This isn't family drama, Thomas said firmly. This is gross negligence. I glanced at Preston. He sat at the far end, sweating through his custom suit. Who exactly are you accusing? A board member demanded. Thomas didn't flinch. Forensics proved that $5 million was illegally wired to a shell LLC managed by Preston. Preston shot up. I was an authorized proxy. I only executed the signature. Under whose directive? Thomas fired back. Preston clamped his mouth shut. Every eye in the room pivoted to the chairman emeritus. Finally, Richard spoke. His voice was gravelly, carrying the absolute authority of a king. What exactly are you trying to accomplish, Thomas? I am fixing a fatal error, Thomas replied. Do you have a shred of proof that I embezzled capital? Richard challenged. I have proof the capital was diverted to bail out the Chicago acquisition, Thomas said. And I have proof the original project bled out. And I know you let a good man take the fall. I saw Richard's hands tighten into fists on the leather armrests. You are remarkably naive. I am not naive, Thomas said. I am just done lying. The room erupted. If this breaches the SEC, the stock will crater. Thousands of employees will suffer. A director yelled. So we maintain the cover-up and live with the rot? Thomas asked the room. No one answered. I stood up. Excuse me. My voice shook slightly, but it cut through the chaos. Every head turned to me. I am the daughter of the man you scapegoated 20 years ago. The silence was deafening. I am not asking for a payout, I continued, looking directly at Richard. I am only asking for the historical record to be corrected. Richard looked at me, his expression unreadable. What exactly do you want, Miss Davis? I want the original, unredacted banking logs entered into the official corporate minutes, I said, and I want the old tribunal records officially amended. Richard remained silent. You know my father wasn't a thief, I said, my voice steadying. If you believe what you did was for the good of the company, you shouldn't be afraid to put your name on it. The air in the room was suffocating. Preston finally cracked. It's true. The wire was executed via executive directive. I looked at him. I didn't have the authority. Preston admitted, his voice cracking. I just signed the paper. Why didn't you whistleblow then? A board member asked. Because I was terrified, Preston whispered. The reality is brutally simple. Richard finally stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. I did not pocket a single cent. I used that capital as a bridge loan to save the conglomerate from bankruptcy. If I hadn't, none of you would be sitting in these ergonomic chairs right now. But you didn't disclose it, I said. Because Wall Street would have panicked, Richard said coldly. So you let my father carry the stigma of a felon. Richard looked at me for a long, heavy moment. He could have fought me. He trusted you. The silence that followed was agonizing. Thomas spoke up. We can debate the ethics until we're blue in the face. But the undeniable fact is that Vivian's father bore a false conviction. Richard sat back down, suddenly looking every bit of his 70 years. I never intended for him to go out like that, he murmured. He didn't want to drag his family through a federal indictment. I said, fighting the lump in my throat. I refuse to cry in this room. We don't need a public press release. Thomas told the board. But the internal corporate minutes will be formally amended today to state that the capital diversion was an executive-level crisis management decision, absolving the former CFO of all malfeasance. A senior director nodded slowly. That is an acceptable compromise. Richard closed his eyes for a second. Draft the amendment. Let the record state the CFO was not liable. My heart slammed against my ribs. And, Thomas added, the corporation formally apologizes to his estate. Richard opened his eyes. Draft it. The room exhaled. I didn't know whether to feel relief or anger that it took 20 years. Preston stared at the floor. Outside the glass walls, I saw Lauren watching. Her eyes held no malice anymore. As the board members filed out, only Thomas and I remained. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, wiping a stray tear that finally escaped. His name is cleared. At least internally. I'll ensure you get a certified copy of the minutes, he said. I looked at him. What about you? He smiled sadly. I just staged a coup against my own father. I stepped toward him. Thank you. No, Thomas shook his head. Thank you for not staying quiet. Through the glass, I saw Richard standing alone by the elevator banks. He looked smaller than before. The greatest sin wasn't moving the money. It was lacking the courage to own it. I took a deep breath. The night of the gala started with a roofie and a wine glass, but it ended with the exorcism of a 2-decade-old ghost. I only had one thing left to do. Call my mom. I went straight back to Brooklyn. My apartment looked exactly the same, but the energy inside me had fundamentally shifted. The suffocating paranoia of being hunted was gone. The agonizing doubt between blind faith and bitter reality was resolved. My father was exonerated. Even if it was just in a sealed corporate ledger, even if it wasn't on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the official record was clean. His name was no longer synonymous with embezzlement. I sat on the couch and dialed my mom's number. Vivian? She answered. Mom. What is it, sweetie? Dad is cleared, I said, the words tumbling out. Silence on the other end. What did you say? The board opened the old files. They formally admitted the missing money was an executive diversion. Dad had nothing to do with it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my throat was closing up. My mom didn't say anything. I just heard her breath hitch, followed by a soft, broken sob. For 20 years, she had never defended him publicly. She just held on to her quiet faith. Now, that faith had empirical proof. You did it, she cried softly. Your father. He can rest now. I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not out of pain, but absolute, weightless relief. The next morning, I walked into the Manhattan office early. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Interns rushed by with coffee business as usual. But the tectonic plates had shifted. Preston's office was empty. His resignation had been quietly accepted late last night. No dramatic emails, just a brief HR memo about an executive transition. Lauren was back from administrative leave, focusing strictly on her division. She walked past my desk and paused. Congratulations, she said, quietly. I didn't win anything, I replied. Lauren offered a faint, genuine smile. At least you beat yourself. She lingered for a second. I'm sorry. About that night at the gala, I looked at her. The venom was completely gone. Just 2 corporate soldiers who had survived a brutal campaign. I thought if I could knock you off the project, I'd get the VP slot, Lauren admitted. But I almost nuked my own life instead. We all pay the invoice for our choices, I said. She nodded. I'm starting over. She walked away, leaving me with a strange sense of closure. Around noon, Thomas walked over to my cubicle. He leaned against the partition, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. Richard is stepping down from the chairman emeritus role entirely, he said. I paused. Because of this? Because of everything, Thomas said. He told me it was time to step off the board. It was a proud man's way of accepting defeat without saying the words. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I'm a son," he said quietly. "But I'm also the CEO. Some collisions are unavoidable." I stood up. "Thank you, Thomas. I already told you." He smiled. "If you hadn't pushed, I never would have had the leverage to break the old guard." I met his eyes, the heavy veil of mistrust completely gone. "Do you ever think," I asked, "that if I hadn't swapped those glasses, none of this would have happened?" He laughed softly. "If you hadn't swapped the glasses, you'd probably have been fired, and the ghosts would have stayed buried forever." I thought back to that moment in the bathroom hallway, seeing Lauren empty the packet. If I had screamed, it would have been a messy HR nightmare. But nothing more. If I had drank it, I would have been collateral damage. But I chose to swap the glass. One microscopic choice triggered a butterfly effect nobody could have predicted. "Do you regret it?" Thomas asked. I shook my head. That weekend, I drove upstate. The house looked exactly the same. My mom was watering the hydrangeas on the porch when I pulled into the driveway. She dropped the hose and hugged me fiercely. After dinner, I took the certified copy of the corporate minutes and placed it on the mantelpiece, right next to the urn and my father's framed photograph. "Dad," I whispered, "I did it. I don't believe in the supernatural, but in that living room, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace." My mom stood behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "He's proud of you," she said. I looked at the photo of the quiet man with the gentle smile. "I didn't stay silent like you did," I thought. "But I finally understand why you did it. Sometimes silence is a shield to protect the people you love, but sometimes it's a curse that poisons generations." I drove back down to the city on Sunday. The Hudson Yards project was moving forward. Thomas was settling into his untethered role as CEO, and the firm was stabilizing. One late afternoon, as I was reviewing CAD blueprints, Thomas walked over. "Coffee break?" he asked. "I'm on the clock," I teased. "I'm the CEO," he replied smoothly. I laughed and followed him down to the ground floor cafe. The late afternoon sun sliced through the massive glass lobby, bathing New York City in a warm, golden hue. "Are you still mad at me?" Thomas asked as we waited for our espressos. "For what?" "For being the son of the man who ruined your father's reputation." I was quiet for a second. "No," I said. "The sins of the father aren't the burdens of the son. Not if the son is brave enough to fix them." He looked at me, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "So, we're operating on a clean slate from here on out?" "I always play fair," I smiled. He chuckled. I looked out the window at the endless stream of pedestrians. This whole saga started with a toxic trap in a wine glass, but it ended with the unearthing of a 20-year-old truth. I used to think I was just defending my career from a dirty corporate hit. I had no idea I was walking into the epicenter of my own family's history. Life in this city is funny like that. A split-second decision can rewrite your entire trajectory. If you asked me what I learned from all the blood, sweat, and tears of the last month, I only have one answer. Never stay silent when you know you're right. And never be afraid of the truth, even if it makes the people in power tremble. Because it's only when the truth is finally spoken out loud that the people left behind can truly find peace.